Welcome once again to the Solid Signal podcast for the week of May 16th, 2022. The subject this week is that bucket of cables. You know, it's springtime, almost summer actually, but it's springtime. And if you haven't done spring cleaning yet, well, you're probably thinking about doing it. And every year around this time, I take a look at this bucket of cables that I haven't touched in about 5 years. And I swear I'm going to do something with it. And then I look at it and I convince myself that I'm going to need something in there, and I end up not touching it. I end up convincing myself that everything in there is critical and that I am going to need it at some point in my life. Well, you know, we had a couple of years in 2020 and 2021 where we had to really rely on what we had on hand. We had to be inventive. And even in that time, I never went into that bucket of cables. And I really kind of surprised myself in that sense because I thought, hey, I probably would need all that stuff. And so I went into it again very recently. And I thought, okay, it's time to get rid of a bunch of stuff. It's really time to let go. And I cleaned out that bucket. I cleaned it out hard. I got rid of RCA cables. I got rid of every power supply that I had been hoarding since 1995, thinking at some point I'm going to need it because I'll have a thing that needs a power supply and all of a sudden I'll have it. I got rid of Ethernet cables that I had custom made myself 20 years ago, thinking, okay, I'm going to need a cable exactly this length. I got rid of all sorts of stuff. I got rid of remote controls to things that I don't even have anymore, but somehow convinced myself that I would someday need the remote. And if any of this is sounding familiar to you, don't feel bad. We all have that box of stuff that we thought we would need. It's an outgrowth of the idea of the junk drawer. Now, we all started with a junk drawer, and then the junk drawer got too big and it got to be a junk box, and then it got to be a junk tub, and for some of us it's an entire junk garage. I'm going to encourage you now to really take an honest look at what's in there and deal with that and do what I did and ask yourself, just, am I gonna touch that stuff? Is it really worth keeping? Because chances are it is not. Chances are there's a bunch of stuff in there that you're just never going to use. In the future, pretty much everything is going to charge over USB. There will be a few things with unique power adapters, but fewer and fewer every year because USB Type-C can handle pretty much any power need that you've got. There's no point in having all of these different connectors. Nobody's going to want them. So get rid of all those power adapters. Get rid of those Ethernet cables if you're not using it. And for God's sake, get rid of those old HDMI cables. If you've been hoarding HDMI cables since 2006, it's time to get rid of them. Because regardless of what you think, you will not want to use them. Today's televisions require better HDMI cables than you got 10 years ago. And if you try to use those old HDMI cables, they will just make you sad because they will not work. Get rid of all of it. Get rid of old remotes that you think you're going to need. If you have 10 old DirecTV remotes, save one if you really must. But you really don't have to. You know, the time when you have to be self-sufficient like that, it's gone. It's over. You can get the stuff you need fast, and you can get it from solidsignal.com or from somewhere else. But the truth is, you don't have to hold on to everything. You know, it seems like it was a very long time ago when that whole Marie Kondo thing came up and, you know, does this spark joy? And if not, get rid of it. But when it comes down to your technology, that's still a really good idea. Do those ink cartridges to a printer that you got rid of 7 years ago really spark joy? Or do they really just create frustration? Chances are they create frustration. Get rid of those ink cartridges, and while you're at it, get rid of the printer. If you haven't printed one time in 6 months, just forget about it. Just don't. If you need to print one thing every 6 months, you know, go down to your local FedEx office or whatever. go into the office with the thing, your actual physical office, and you don't need a printer. Nobody needs a printer today. I've run into so many people who had so many troubles with their printers because if you don't use a printer in 6 months, something bad happens to it and it breaks and you just can't deal with it. Get rid of all that old stuff. Just do it. Consolidate. You do not need 25 micro USB cables. Save 2 or 3 if you must. But get rid of them all. You just thought you were going to keep them because, they cost money or whatever. Same thing with those lightning cables, because the truth is, Apple's probably going to ditch lightning in favor of USB Type-C fairly soon anyway. So just, if you need those things, something sitting around all that time, it's just not worth keeping. You'll feel better and you'll probably have a better time at home if you just get rid of a bunch of old, obsolete technology. Take it from me, I probably have had more than anybody else and cleaned it all out. It feels great. And when you need something new, do me a favor and check out solidsignal.com because, honestly, they're really good folks. They sponsor this podcast and they let me talk about pretty much anything that I want to talk about. And so give them a shot. See if they've got the thing you need. Chances are that they do, and they've got it with fast shipping at a great price. And if you have questions, you can always call them at 888-233-7563. That's 888-233-7563, and they'll answer any question that you've got. It's time for me to end this podcast. It's one of the shorter ones, but the idea was a pretty simple one to begin with. So do this for me. Like and subscribe. It makes me look good to my bosses and it helps me rank this podcast a little higher. I'll leave a comment anywhere that you listen to this podcast and listen again next week. I look forward to seeing you, hearing from you, and once again, go back, clean that stuff out. That's all for this week. I'll see you again next week on the Solid Signal Podcast.